Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of humanity's most powerful stories of betrayal, perseverance, and ultimate redemption. We're talking about Joseph, a young man sold into slavery by his own brothers, who rose to become second in command of Egypt. And before we start, just a heads up, you probably think you know this story from childhood Sunday school classes. Not because it is simple. Well, maybe it seems that way on the surface. But if you really dig into what theologians have wrestled with for centuries, you'll realize this isn't just about a dreamer with a colorful coat. It is about divine providence, forgiveness that transcends human understanding, and how suffering can become the pathway to purpose and healing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy stories that explore the depths of human resilience and faith. Also, I'd love to know what city you are watching from, and what is your take on forgiveness? Can betrayal ever truly be overcome? Now, dim the lights, maybe grab something warm to drink, and let's ease into tonight's journey through ancient Egypt together. In the ancient land of Canaan, where shepherds tended their flocks beneath star-filled skies, lived a man named Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, but among them all, Joseph held a special place in his father's aging heart and weathered hands. Joseph was 17, bright-eyed and eager, with dreams that seemed to dance behind his eyes even in waking hours. His father loved him more than his other sons, perhaps because Joseph reminded him of his beloved wife Rachel. To show this special affection, Jacob crafted for Joseph a coat of many colors, rich with vibrant threads and intricate patterns. The coat was beautiful, a masterpiece of fabric and love, but it became a symbol of favoritism that would change everything. When Joseph wore his colorful coat among his brothers, their hearts grew heavy with jealousy and bitter resentment. They watched as their father's eyes lit up whenever Joseph entered a room, while they felt invisible and unloved. The brothers worked long days in the fields, their hands rough from labor, their backs aching from endless toil. But Joseph seemed to float above such mundane concerns, wrapped in his beautiful coat and his father's unwavering affection. One morning, as the sun painted the hills golden, Joseph approached his brothers with excitement dancing in his voice. "Listen to this dream I had," he said, his eyes bright with wonder and innocent enthusiasm about his vision. "We were binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright perfectly. Then your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it," he continued, unaware of the storm brewing in their hearts. His brothers exchanged dark glances, their faces hardening like stone as they processed the implications of his words. "Are you suggesting you will rule over us?" they asked, their voices tight with barely controlled anger and growing hatred. Joseph, in his youthful naivety, shared another dream that would deepen the chasm between them even further. "I saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Even their father Jacob was troubled by this second dream, gently rebuking Joseph for his seemingly arrogant words. But Jacob pondered these dreams in his heart, wondering if there might be divine significance hidden within them. The brothers' resentment festered like an infected wound, growing more poisonous with each passing day and sleepless night. They whispered among themselves during their work, their conversations filled with bitter complaints and dangerous suggestions about their favored brother. "Here comes that dreamer," they would mutter when they saw Joseph approaching across the fields in his colorful coat. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were pasturing their flocks in the distant fields. Joseph set out eagerly, unaware that this journey would forever alter the course of his life and destiny. When his brothers saw him coming from afar, his colorful coat visible against the barren landscape, they hatched a plan. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns," they said with cold determination. "We can say that a ferocious animal devoured him, and then we'll see what becomes of his dreams," they plotted. But Reuben, the eldest brother, felt a stirring of conscience and tried to save Joseph from their murderous intent. "Let's not take his life," Reuben said. "Throw him into this cistern instead, but don't lay a hand on him." When Joseph reached his brothers, they seized him with rough hands and stripped away his beautiful, colorful coat. The coat that had been a symbol of love now became a tool of deception and evidence of their betrayal. They threw him into an empty cistern, its walls dark and cold, echoing with his cries for mercy and help. Joseph's voice rose from the depths, pleading with his brothers to remember their shared childhood and father's love. But their hearts had grown hard as stone, and they sat down to eat their meal while ignoring his desperate cries. As they ate, they noticed a caravan of Ishmaelite traders approaching, their camels loaded with spices and goods. Judah, one of the brothers, suddenly had an idea that would profit them while avoiding direct murder of their brother. "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?" he asked the others pragmatically. "Come, let's sell him to these Ishmaelites instead of harming him ourselves," he suggested with cold calculation. The brothers agreed, and when the traders arrived, they pulled Joseph from the cistern and sold him for 20 silver coins. With Joseph gone, the brothers faced the terrible task of explaining his disappearance to their unsuspecting father. They took his colourful coat and dipped it in goat's blood, staining the beautiful fabric with false evidence. Returning home with heavy steps, they presented the bloodied garment to Jacob with feigned sorrow and manufactured grief. "We found this," they said. "Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe or not." Jacob recognized the coat immediately, his face crumbling with grief as he held the bloodied fabric in trembling hands. "It is my son's robe," he cried. "Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." The old man tore his clothes in anguish, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his beloved son for many days. His daughters and sons tried to comfort him, but Jacob refused to be consoled in his overwhelming grief and despair. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave," his voice breaking with sorrow. The brothers watched their father's pain, carrying the weight of their deception like stones in their hearts. Meanwhile, Joseph found himself chained among strangers, the caravan moving steadily toward the ancient land of Egypt. The young man who had once worn a coat of many colours now wore the rough garments of a slave. His dreams seemed like distant memories as he walked through the desert, his feet growing sore and his spirit tested. But even in his darkest moments, Joseph clung to the faith his father had taught him about God's faithfulness. The caravan travelled for many days, following ancient trade routes that connected distant lands and diverse cultures. Joseph observed everything around him, learning the language and customs of his captors with remarkable adaptability and intelligence. When they finally reached Egypt, Joseph marvelled at the massive pyramids and bustling cities filled with activity and commerce. The land was unlike anything he had ever seen, with the mighty Nile River flowing through fertile valleys. In the slave markets of Egypt, Joseph stood among other captives, his future uncertain, but his faith quietly enduring. A man named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard, noticed Joseph among the slaves. Potiphar purchased Joseph, taking him to serve in his household among the other servants and workers. Joseph applied himself diligently to his duties, showing integrity and wisdom that quickly caught his master's attention and respect. The Lord was with Joseph, and everything he touched seemed to prosper under his careful management and faithful service. Potiphar recognized Joseph's exceptional abilities and gradually gave him more responsibilities and authority within the household. Joseph proved himself trustworthy in small matters, then in greater ones, earning his master's complete confidence and trust. Soon, Potiphar put Joseph in charge of his entire household, trusting him with all his possessions and affairs. Under Joseph's management, Potiphar's household prospered like never before, with abundance flowing into every area of their lives. The Hebrew slave had become the most trusted servant in Egypt, respected by all who knew him. Joseph's integrity and wisdom made him stand out among his peers, and his reputation for fairness spread throughout the region. But success would bring its own challenges, and Joseph's character would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. As time passed, Joseph grew into a handsome and capable young man, attracting attention from various quarters. Potiphar's wife began to notice Joseph's good looks and began to develop inappropriate feelings toward her husband's trusted servant. Day after day, she tried to seduce Joseph, but he consistently refused her advances with firm but respectful determination. "My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife," Joseph explained with unwavering moral clarity. "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" he asked, appealing to higher principles. But Potiphar's wife persisted in her attempts, growing more frustrated with each rejection and more determined to have her way. One day, when the household was nearly empty, she grabbed Joseph's cloak and made another desperate attempt at seduction. Joseph fled from her grasp, leaving his cloak behind as he ran from the house to preserve his integrity. In her rage and humiliation, Potiphar's wife decided to take revenge on Joseph for his repeated rejections of her advances. She screamed for help, claiming that Joseph had attempted to assault her, using his abandoned cloak as false evidence. When Potiphar heard his wife's accusations, his anger burned against Joseph, despite years of faithful service and proven integrity. Without a proper trial or investigation, Potiphar had Joseph thrown into the royal prison, where political prisoners were held. Joseph's world collapsed around him as he found himself in a dark, damp cell, falsely accused and abandoned. But even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph, and he found favor with the prison warden and fellow inmates. The warden soon recognized Joseph's exceptional character and administrative abilities, putting him in charge of other prisoners and daily operations. Joseph once again proved his worth through diligent service, and the warden entrusted him with significant responsibilities within the prison system. Two of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, were imprisoned and placed under Joseph's care. One night, both men had troubling dreams that left them confused and deeply disturbed about their potential meanings. Joseph noticed their distress and asked them why they looked so troubled and downcast that particular morning. "We both had dreams, but there is no one to interpret them," they replied with obvious frustration and concern. "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Joseph asked gently. "Tell me your dreams, and perhaps God will provide understanding." The cupbearer shared his dream first. "I saw a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into the cup, and placed it in Pharaoh's hand." Joseph listened carefully, then provided the interpretation with confidence. "The 3 branches are 3 days within which you'll be restored. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position as his personal cupbearer." Joseph then made a personal request. "When all goes well with you, remember me and show kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh. Get me out of this prison, for I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews without cause." The chief baker, encouraged by the positive interpretation, shared his dream. "I had 3 white baskets on my head. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds were eating them out of the basket." Joseph's face grew solemn as he delivered the darker interpretation. "The 3 baskets are 3 days of remaining life. Within 3 days, Pharaoh celebrated his birthday with a great feast, and Joseph's interpretations proved absolutely accurate. The chief cupbearer was restored to his position, once again serving wine to Pharaoh at the royal palace. The chief baker was executed exactly as Joseph had predicted. His body hung on a tree for all to see. Joseph waited eagerly for the cupbearer to remember his promise and mention him to Pharaoh for possible release. But the cupbearer, enjoying his restored position and freedom, completely forgot about Joseph and his request for help. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still Joseph remained in the dark prison, seemingly forgotten by everyone. Yet Joseph continued to serve faithfully, trusting that God had a purpose for his suffering and extended imprisonment. He maintained his integrity and character, even when it seemed that justice and mercy had completely abandoned him. 2 full years passed, and Joseph remained in prison, his dreams of leadership seemingly dead and buried forever. But God's timing is perfect, and he was preparing Joseph for something far greater than he could have imagined. One night, Pharaoh had 2 disturbing dreams that left him restless and deeply troubled about their potential meaning. In the first dream, he stood by the Nile River and saw 7 healthy, fat cows grazing peacefully. Then 7 lean, ugly cows came up from the river and devoured the fat cows, but remained as thin as before. In the second dream, Pharaoh saw 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind, and swallowed up the healthy grain. Pharaoh woke up troubled, his mind racing with questions about what these strange dreams might signify for his kingdom. In the morning, he summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt to interpret his dreams. They came with their books and instruments, but none could provide a satisfactory explanation for the troubling visions. Pharaoh's frustration grew as his advisors offered various theories, but no definitive interpretation that brought him peace. Suddenly, the The cupbearer remembered Joseph and his remarkable ability to interpret dreams with uncanny accuracy 2 years earlier. "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings," the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, with obvious regret and embarrassment. He told Pharaoh about Joseph, the Hebrew slave, who had correctly interpreted both his and the baker's dreams. "There was a young Hebrew with us, a servant of the captain of the guard," he explained carefully. "We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream, and things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us," the cupbearer continued, with growing excitement about Joseph's abilities. Pharaoh immediately ordered that Joseph be brought from the prison, and messengers ran to fetch the Hebrew interpreter. Joseph quickly shaved, changed his clothes, and prepared to stand before the most powerful ruler in the ancient world. As he walked through the palace corridors, Joseph's heart pounded, but he trusted in God's sovereign plan for his life. The throne room was magnificent, filled with gold and precious stones, but Joseph kept his eyes focused on his purpose. Standing before Pharaoh, Joseph felt the weight of this moment that would determine not only his fate, but potentially Egypt's future. "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it," Pharaoh said. "But I have heard that you can interpret dreams," Joseph replied with humility and reverence. "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Pharaoh recounted both dreams in detail, describing the fat and lean cows, the healthy and withered grain stalks. Joseph listened intently, then spoke with confidence. "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed his plan. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years of great abundance. The 7 lean, ugly cows and the 7 worthless heads of grain are 7 years of severe famine ahead. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, when crops will flourish beyond imagination, but they will be followed by 7 years of famine so severe that the abundance will be forgotten completely." The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon, so immediate action must be taken to prepare for what is coming. Joseph continued with practical wisdom. "Now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man to put in charge of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under Pharaoh's authority. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine. Otherwise, the country will be ruined by the famine, and many will die from hunger and desperation." Pharaoh and his officials were amazed by Joseph's interpretation and the practical wisdom of his suggested plan. "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Pharaoh asked his advisors. Then Pharaoh turned to Joseph. "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders and authority. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you," Pharaoh declared with absolute authority and confidence. Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's hand, giving him complete authority over Egypt. He dressed Joseph in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck as symbols of his new position. Joseph rode in a chariot as Pharaoh's second-in-command, with people shouting, "Make way," before him wherever he went. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, as his wife. At 30 years old, Joseph began serving as second ruler of Egypt, the most powerful nation in the ancient world. He traveled throughout Egypt, assessing the land and preparing for the implementation of his 7-year plan for abundance and famine. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph collected enormous quantities of grain, like the sand of the seashore. He built massive storage facilities throughout Egypt, organizing the collection and preservation of food with remarkable efficiency and foresight. Joseph's administrative skills and divine wisdom made him one of the most respected leaders in Egyptian history. The Hebrew slave had become the most powerful man in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself in authority and influence. The 7 years of abundance were unlike anything Egypt had ever experienced in its long and storied history. Crops grew in unprecedented quantities, and the land yielded harvests that exceeded every farmer's wildest dreams and expectations. Joseph organized the collection systematically, ensuring that 1/5 of all produce was stored in government facilities throughout the kingdom. Massive granaries were built in every city, their walls rising high to contain the enormous quantities of grain being collected. Joseph's name became synonymous with wisdom and prosperity throughout Egypt, and the surrounding nations that heard of his success. During these years of plenty, Joseph's wife Asenath bore him 2 sons, bringing personal joy to complement his professional success. He named the firstborn Manasseh, saying, "God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim, meaning, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Joseph's family brought him happiness, but his heart still carried memories of his father and brothers back in Canaan. As the 7th year of abundance ended, Joseph knew that the time of testing was about to begin for Egypt. Just as Joseph had predicted, the 7 years of famine began, and the abundance of Egypt became a distant memory. The Nile River, which had always provided life to Egypt, seemed to withhold its blessing as crops failed across the land. The carefully stored grain in Joseph's warehouses became the lifeline for Egypt's survival during this unprecedented crisis and hardship. Joseph opened the storehouses and began selling grain to the Egyptian people, managing distribution with wisdom and fairness. The famine was not limited to Egypt, but spread throughout the known world, affecting all the surrounding nations and peoples. Countries that had never known hunger suddenly found themselves facing starvation and desperation as their crops failed completely. People from many lands came to Egypt to buy grain, as word spread that Joseph had prepared for this calamity. The Hebrew slave, who had once been thrown into a pit by his brothers, now controlled the food supply of the ancient world. Meanwhile, in Canaan, Jacob and his family felt the grip of hunger as their flocks and crops struggled in the harsh conditions. The famine that would bring Joseph face to face with his past was beginning to tighten its grip on his homeland. When Jacob learned that there was grain available in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at each other? I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, because he might be harmed, Jacob said, still haunted by the loss of Joseph and unwilling to risk Benjamin's safety. The brothers joined the countless people traveling to Egypt, their hearts heavy with worry about their family's survival. They had no idea that the brother they had sold into slavery 20 years earlier now controlled Egypt's food supply. When they arrived in Egypt, they were directed to the palace, where the governor personally overseen grain distribution to foreign buyers. Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground, just as his childhood dreams had foretold. Although Joseph recognized his brothers immediately, they did not recognize him after 20 years and his Egyptian appearance and clothing. Joseph remembered his dreams about his brothers bowing down to him, but he felt no satisfaction, only complex emotions and painful memories. Joseph spoke harshly to his brothers, disguising his voice. "Where do you come from?" he demanded with authority. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food for our survival during this terrible famine." Joseph accused them of being spies. "You have come to see where our land is unprotected and vulnerable to attack." "No, my lord," they said. "Your servants have come to buy food, not to spy on your great nation. We are all the sons of one man in Canaan. We are honest men, not spies seeking to harm Egypt." Joseph continued his deception. "No, you have come to see where our land is unprotected and find our weaknesses." The brothers protested their innocence. "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man in Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more," they said, unknowingly describing Joseph's supposed death. Joseph's heart stirred at the mention of Benjamin and his father, but he maintained his stern facade and continued testing them. He devised a plan to test their character and discover if they had changed since selling him into slavery. "This is how you will be tested," Joseph declared with the authority of his high position in Egypt. "By the life of Pharaoh, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here to prove your words. Send one of your number to get your brother, while the rest of you will be kept in prison until your words are verified. If you do not bring him, then by the life of Pharaoh, you are surely spies seeking to harm our nation." Joseph put them all in custody for 3 days, giving them time to consider his demands and their desperate situation. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God and want to be fair. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go back. Take grain for your starving families, but bring your youngest brother to me to verify your words and prove your honesty. Then you will not die, and I will know that you are not spies, but honest men seeking only to feed your families." The brothers agreed to this arrangement, realizing they had no choice but to comply with the governor's demands. The brothers began speaking to one another in Hebrew, not knowing that Joseph could understand their every word. "Surely we are being punished because of our brother," they said, their voices heavy with long-suppressed guilt and remorse. "We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen to his cries. That is why this distress has come upon us now. We are finally paying for what we did to Joseph." Reuben said, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen to my warnings. Now we must give an accounting for his blood, and God is bringing justice for our terrible deed." Joseph turned away from them and wept, his heart breaking at their confession and display of remorse after all these years. When he returned to them, he had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes as a hostage. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to put each man's silver back in his sack secretly. He also gave them provisions for their journey back to Canaan, showing mercy even while maintaining his deception. The brothers loaded their grain on their donkeys and left Egypt, their hearts heavy with worry about Simeon's fate. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to give his donkey food. "My silver has been returned," he exclaimed in shock and fear. "Here it is in my sack, exactly as I paid it." Their hearts sank with dread, and they turned to each other trembling. "What is this that God has done to us?" They feared they would be accused of theft and face even worse punishment when they returned to Egypt for Simeon. When they reached their father Jacob in Canaan, they told him all that had happened in Egypt with the powerful governor. "The man who is lord of that land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the country. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We are not spies trying to harm your great nation. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan.' Then the man who is lord of that land said to us, 'This is how I will know whether you are honest men.'" Jacob listened to their report with growing alarm and grief, as they described their encounter with Egypt's harsh governor. "Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for your starving families and go back to your homes. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men seeking only food. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade freely in our land without fear of punishment." As they emptied their sacks, each man found his pouch of silver, causing fear to grip their hearts even more tightly. When Jacob saw the money pouches, he was filled with dread about what this might mean for his family's future. "You have deprived me of my children," Jacob said, his voice breaking with accumulated grief and fresh worry. "Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin away from me too. Everything is against me, and I cannot bear to lose another son after all I have already suffered." Reuben tried to reassure his father. "You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring Benjamin back to you safely." Jacob refused Reuben's offer. "My son will not go down there with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my grey head down to the grave in sorrow." The famine continued to ravage the land, and the grain they had bought from Egypt was quickly consumed by the extended family. When the food was gone, Jacob said to his sons, "Go back and buy us a little more food to keep us alive." But Judah said to him, "The man warned us solemnly, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for our survival. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, because the man said we would not see his face again." Jacob asked in frustration, "Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother?" They replied, "The man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family, asking specific questions about our background. 'Is your father still living? Do you have another brother?' We simply answered his questions honestly and directly. 'How could we possibly know?' he would say. 'Bring your brother down here to prove your words are true.' They protested. Then Judah said to Israel his father, 'Send the boy along with me, and we will go at once to Egypt, so that we and you and our children may live and not die from this terrible famine that threatens us all.' I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for Benjamin's welfare and safe return. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame forever. As it is, if we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice by now with the food we desperately need. Jacob finally realized that his family would starve unless he allowed Benjamin to accompany his brothers to Egypt. If it must be, then do this, Jacob said with resignation. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags. Take some balm and honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds as gifts for the governor. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back in your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake that needs to be corrected, Jacob said hopefully about the mysterious returned silver. Take your brother Benjamin also, and go back to the man immediately before the famine claims more lives. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back. As for me, if I am bereaved, and I must trust in God's sovereign plan for our family. The men took the gifts, and double the amount of silver, and Benjamin also, and hurried down to Egypt with heavy hearts. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my house immediately. Slaughter an animal and prepare a meal. They are to eat with me at noon in my private dining room." The steward did as Joseph said, and took the men to Joseph's house. Though they were filled with fear and anxiety, they were frightened because they had been taken to his house, thinking it was because of the silver that had been returned. "We were brought here because of the silver that was put back in our sacks the first time," they said nervously. The brothers approached Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance to Joseph's house with obvious nervousness. "Please, sir," they said, "we came down here the first time to buy food and paid for it honestly, but at the place where we stopped for the night, we opened our sacks and found our silver back in them. So we have brought it back with us, along with additional silver, to buy more food for our starving families. We don't know who put our silver in our sacks, but we want to make everything right with your master." "It is all right," the steward said. "Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver payment the first time, so there is no debt or wrongdoing on your part whatsoever." Then he brought Simeon out to them, and the brothers were overjoyed to see that he was safe and well. The steward took the men into Joseph's house, and gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkeys. They prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon, since they had heard that they were to eat there with him. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts they had brought into the house, with respectful ceremony. They bowed down before him to the ground, again fulfilling the dreams of his youth in ways they never imagined. "How is your aged father you told me about?" Joseph asked with carefully controlled emotion. "Is he still living and well?" They replied, "Your servant, our father, is still alive and well," and they bowed low to pay him honor. As Joseph looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, his heart filled with overwhelming emotion. "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" Joseph asked, his voice trembling with barely contained feelings. "God be gracious to you, my son," he said to Benjamin, using words that carried deeper meaning than anyone realized. Joseph was deeply moved at the sight of his brother, and he hurried out of the room because he was about to weep. He went into his private room and wept there, allowing his emotions to flow freely away from watching eyes. After he had washed his face and regained his composure, he came out and, controlling himself, said, "Serve the food immediately." They served Joseph by himself, the brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians by themselves, according to cultural customs and social hierarchy. The Egyptians could not eat with Hebrews, for that was detestable to them, according to their long-established traditions and beliefs. The men had been seated before Joseph in the order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest. This arrangement amazed the brothers, who wondered how this Egyptian governor could possibly know their birth order so precisely. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's. This special treatment was Joseph's way of testing his brother's reaction to favoritism, remembering how they had treated him. So they feasted and drank freely with Joseph, and the atmosphere became relaxed and joyful despite their earlier fears. Joseph watched carefully to see if his brothers would show jealousy toward Benjamin, as they once had toward him. To his relief and growing hope, they seemed genuinely happy for Benjamin. and showed no signs of resentment or envy. Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house. Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry. Put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack, just as we did before. But this time add something special. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain. The steward carried out Joseph's instructions exactly as he had been commanded, setting up the final test of his brother's character. Early the next morning, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys, unaware of what awaited them. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Go after those men at once. When you catch up with them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid good with evil and betrayed our master's trust? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from, and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done.'" When the steward caught up with them, he repeated these words, exactly as Joseph had instructed him to say. But they said to him, "Why does my lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? We are honest men, not thieves. If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my lord's slaves." "Very well then," the steward said. "Let it be as you say, but only the one who is found to have it will be my slave. The rest of you will be free from blame, and can return to your father without punishment or consequences." Each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and opened it for inspection with complete confidence in their innocence. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest in systematic order. The brothers watched nervously as each sack was examined, their confidence growing as nothing was found in the first sacks. But when the steward reached Benjamin's sack, he found the silver cup hidden among the grain, exactly as Joseph had planned. At this discovery, the brothers tore their clothes in anguish and despair, their world crashing down around them once again. They loaded their donkeys again and returned to the city, their hearts heavy with dread and fear for Benjamin's fate. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves to the ground before him. "What is this you have done?" Joseph said to them. "Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? What can we say to my lord?" Judah replied with obvious despair. "What can we say to prove our innocence?" "How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt, and we are now all my lord's slaves." But Joseph said, "Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will be my slave. The rest of you, go back to your father in peace, and leave your brother here to serve in my household." Then Judah went up to Joseph and said, "Please, my lord, let your servant speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself in power and authority." My lord asked his servants, "Do you have a father or a brother?" And we answered honestly about our family. And we said to my lord, "We have an aged father, and there is a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him dearly." Then you said to your servants, "Bring him down to me so I can see him with my own eyes." And we said to my lord, "The boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die from grief." But you told your servants, "Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again." When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him what my lord had said about bringing Benjamin. Then our father said, "Go back and buy a little more food for us, because the famine continues to ravage our land." But we said, "We cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go down to Egypt. We cannot see the man's face, unless our youngest brother is with us, as he has commanded us strictly." Your servant, my father, said to us, "You know that my wife bore me 2 sons in our long life together. One of them went away from me, and I said, 'He has surely been torn to pieces by wild animals,' and I have not seen him since that terrible day when he disappeared from our family forever. If you take this one from me too, and harm comes to him, you will bring my grey head down to the grave in sorrow. So now, if the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant, my father, and if our father sees that the boy is not there, he will die from grief, for his life is closely bound up with the boy's life, and he cannot survive without him. Your servants brought our father down to the grave in sorrow, and his grey head will go down in grief because of us. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, 'If I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame forever. Now then, please let your servant remain here, as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers." "How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me?" "No, do not let me see the misery that would come upon my father." Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence immediately." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers, and he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him. Pharaoh's household heard about it, and the news spread quickly throughout the palace that Joseph was revealing his true identity. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him. They were terrified at his presence, unable to comprehend that the powerful Egyptian governor was their long-lost brother whom they had betrayed. "Come close to me," Joseph said gently, and they came close to him with trembling hearts and overwhelming confusion. "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt," he said, his voice filled with emotion rather than accusation. "And now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will not be ploughing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, 'This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay, because I want to see you again and care for you during these remaining years of famine. You shall live in the region of Goshen, and be near me you, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come, and I don't want you to become destitute. You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor accorded me in Egypt, and about everything you have seen here in this great land. And bring my father down here quickly, because I long to see him again after all these years of separation." Then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept, and Benjamin embraced him, weeping with joy and relief. And Joseph kissed all his brothers, and wept over them, releasing years of pent-up emotion, forgiveness, and love. Afterward, his brothers talked with him freely, the barriers of fear and guilt finally broken down by his gracious forgiveness. When the news reached Pharaoh's palace that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and all his officials were pleased about this reunion. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, do this. Load your animals and return to the land of Canaan immediately. Bring your father and your families back to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. You can enjoy the fat of the land and live in comfort and security during these remaining years of famine." You are also directed to tell them, "Take some carts from Egypt for your children and your wives, and get your father and come back. Never mind about your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours to enjoy," Pharaoh declared generously. So the sons of Israel did this, and Joseph gave them carts, as Pharaoh had commanded, and provided them with provisions for their journey. To each of them he gave new clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And this is what he sent to his father: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread. He also sent provisions for his father's journey back to Egypt, showing his love and care for the man who had mourned him. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they were leaving he said to them, "Don't quarrel on the way back home. I know this news will be shocking to our father, so be gentle with him and help him process this amazing revelation." So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan with hearts full of joy. They told him, "Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt." And Jacob was stunned by this incredible news. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts Joseph had sent, Jacob's spirit revived. "I am convinced," Jacob said with growing excitement. "My son Joseph is still alive, and I will go and see him before I die. This is more than I ever dared to hope. For not only is my beloved son alive, but he has become a great ruler." So Israel set out with all that was his, And when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night, "Jacob, Jacob." And he replied, "Here I am, ready to listen. I am God, the God of your father," he said. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, because I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." Then Jacob left Beersheba, and Israel's sons took their father Jacob, and their children and their wives in the carts that Pharaoh had sent. They also took with them their livestock, and the possessions they had acquired in Canaan. And Jacob and all his offspring went to Egypt. He took with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons and his daughters and granddaughters, all his offspring, 70 people in total. The family that had been broken by betrayal and deception was finally being reunited through God's sovereign plan and Joseph's forgiveness. Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel, his heart pounding with anticipation and joy. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time, overwhelmed with emotion. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive and well. The years of grief and mourning are over," Jacob continued, "and my heart is full of joy beyond what I thought possible." Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and speak to Pharaoh, and will say to him about our situation. My brothers and my father's household, who were living in the land of Canaan, have come to me seeking refuge from the famine. The men are shepherds, they tend livestock, and they have brought along their flocks and herds and everything they own. When Pharaoh calls you in and asks, 'What is your occupation?' you should answer, 'Your servants have tended livestock from our boyhood on.' Say this, so that you will be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen, because all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. This would ensure they could maintain their way of life while being separate from Egyptian society and its customs." Joseph went and told Pharaoh, "My father and brothers, with their flocks and herds and everything they own, have come from Canaan. They are now in Goshen, waiting for your permission to settle there permanently during the remaining years of famine." He chose 5 of his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asked them, "What is your occupation and livelihood?" "Your servants are shepherds," they replied to Pharaoh, "just as our fathers were before us in the land of Canaan. We have come to live here a while, because the famine is severe in Canaan, and your servants' flocks have no pasture. Now please let your servants settle in Goshen, where we can continue our way of life without disrupting Egyptian society." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you, and the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land, and let them live in Goshen as you have requested. And if you know of any among them with special ability, put them in charge of my own livestock as well." Then Joseph brought his father Jacob in and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh with dignity and grace. Pharaoh asked Jacob, "How old are you?" showing respect for the elderly patriarch who had lived through so much. Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130, and they have been difficult years. Few and difficult have been the years of my life, and they do not equal the years of my father's pilgrimage." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again, and went out from his presence, having conducted himself with dignity before the great ruler. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers in Egypt, and gave them property in the best part of the land. The region of Ramesses became their home, as Pharaoh had directed, and they prospered there despite the continuing famine. Joseph provided his father and his brothers, and all his father's household with food, according to the number of their children. The family that had been scattered by jealousy and deception was now reunited and thriving under Joseph's loving care. There was no food, however, in the whole region because the famine was severe throughout Egypt and the surrounding lands. But Joseph's careful planning during the years of abundance ensured that Egypt could survive while other nations struggled desperately. Joseph collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan in payment for the grain they were buying. He brought all this money into Pharaoh's treasury, managing Egypt's resources with wisdom and careful stewardship throughout the crisis. When the money of the people of Egypt and Canaan was gone, all Egypt came to Joseph and said desperately, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? Our money is used up, and we have nothing left to pay for grain." "Then bring your livestock," said Joseph. "I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock, since your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, sheep, cattle, and donkeys. And he brought them through that year with food in exchange for all their livestock, ensuring that no one starved during this difficult time. When that year was over, they came to him the following year and said, "We cannot hide from our Lord that our money is gone. Our livestock also belongs to you now, and nothing is left for our Lord, except our bodies and our land. Why should we perish before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land in exchange for food." So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh, and the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was too severe. The land became Pharaoh's property, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude, moving them to cities throughout Egypt. However, he did not buy the land of the priests, because they received a regular allotment from Pharaoh and had food enough. Joseph said to the people, "Now that I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh, here is seed for you. Plant it in the ground so that when the harvest comes, you can feed yourselves and begin to prosper again. But when the crop comes in, give 1/5 of it to Pharaoh, and 4/5 will be your own for future planting." "You have saved our lives," they said. "May we find favor in the eyes of our Lord, and we will be in bondage to Pharaoh." So Joseph established it as a law concerning land in Egypt, that 1/5 of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. It is still in force today, except for the land of the priests, which did not become Pharaoh's property. Now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen, and they acquired property there and were fruitful. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years, and the years of his life were 147 in total. When the time drew near for Israel to die, he called for his son Joseph, and said with urgent sincerity, "If I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh, and promise me that you will show me kindness and faithfulness in my final request. Do not bury me in Egypt, but when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt, and bury me where they are buried." "I will do as you say," Joseph replied. Understanding the importance of this final wish to his beloved father, "Swear to me," Jacob insisted. And Joseph swore to him that he would honor this request and bury him in Canaan. Then Israel worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff, expressing his faith and gratitude to God. Some time later, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill," so he took his 2 sons Manasseh and Ephraim along with him. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up on the bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and there he blessed me greatly. He said to me, 'I am going to make you fruitful, and will increase your numbers throughout the generations. I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give this land as an everlasting possession to your descendants after you. Now then, your 2 sons born to you in Egypt, before I came to you here, will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine, with equal inheritance rights among my sons." When Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, "Who are these young men standing before me in this room?" "They are the sons God has given me here," Joseph said to his father with pride and joy in his voice. Then Israel said, "Bring them to me so I may bless them before I die and pass on God's covenant promises." Now Israel's eyes were failing because of old age, and he could hardly see the faces of his grandsons clearly. So Joseph brought his sons close to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them with trembling but loving arms. Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too." Then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground in respectful reverence. Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left toward Israel's right hand. But Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger of the 2. He crossed his arms and put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn son. Then he blessed Joseph and said, "May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys, and may they be called by my name. May they increase greatly upon the earth, and carry on the covenant promises God made to our family." When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased and tried to correct him. He took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head, saying, "No, my father, This one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head instead, because he deserves the greater blessing as the older son." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son. I know exactly what I am doing in this blessing. He too will become a people, and he too will become great among the nations of the earth. But his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations." He blessed them that day and said, "In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh, establishing a pattern of God's choosing that would continue through Israel's history. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you, as one who is over your brothers, I give the ridge of land I took from the Amorites with sword and bow." These words carried deep meaning about Joseph's future role in God's plan for the family and the nation. Jacob's blessings were not just emotional farewells, but prophetic statements about what God would do through these descendants. The old patriarch was passing on not just his possessions, but the covenant promises God had made to Abraham and Isaac. Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel as he speaks his final words to you." Each son received words that were both blessing and prophecy, revealing their character and their descendants' future destiny. Some received words of honor and promise, while others heard warnings about the consequences of past actions and choices. Jacob's words were filled with the wisdom of a man who had walked with God through triumph and tragedy. He spoke of Judah's future leadership and the scepter that would not depart from his descendants throughout history. He prophesied about the coming of Shiloh, the one to whom the obedience of the nations would belong. These words would echo through the centuries as Israel remembered their patriarch's final prophetic blessing upon them. When Jacob finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last breath. He was gathered to his people, completing a life marked by both struggle and blessing, deception and redemption. Joseph threw himself upon his father's face and wept over him and kissed him in the depth of his grief. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel, following Egyptian customs for preservation. The physicians took 40 days to complete the embalming process, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please speak to Pharaoh for me. My father made me swear an oath and said, 'I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return to continue serving you faithfully.' Pharaoh said, 'Go up and bury your father as he made you swear to do, and honor his final request.' So Joseph went up to bury his father, and all Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court, and all the dignitaries of Egypt. Besides them, all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers, and those belonging to his father's household went with him. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen, while the family made this solemn journey. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him, making it a very large company for this important funeral procession. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly for 7 days. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said with amazement, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning." That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim, meaning mourning of the Egyptians. So Jacob's sons did, as he had commanded them about his burial in the family tomb in Canaan. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah. This was the cave near Mamre, which Abraham had bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, along with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him. The family tomb now held Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, connecting the generations in death as they had been in life. The covenant promises would continue through Joseph and his brothers, even though the patriarch was gone. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us now? What if he pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him when we sold him into slavery?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died about how we should approach you. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and wrongs they committed. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." And Joseph wept when he received this message. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him and said, "We are your slaves. ready to serve you. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God to judge you for your actions? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done. The saving of many lives has been the result of what you meant for evil, and God has used it for his purposes. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph stayed in Egypt, along with all his father's family, and he lived to see the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also, the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees, becoming part of his extended family. Joseph lived 110 years, seeing God's faithfulness throughout his long and eventful life. He had risen from slavery to become the second most powerful man in Egypt, saving countless lives through his wisdom. His journey from the pit to the palace had been marked by trials, but also by God's constant presence and blessing. Joseph had learned that God can use even the worst human intentions to accomplish his perfect will and plan. The dreams of his youth had been fulfilled in ways he never could have imagined as a 17-year-old boy. His brother's jealousy and betrayal had become the pathway to his destiny as a savior of nations during the famine. Joseph's life demonstrated that God's purposes cannot be thwarted by human sin or the circumstances of life. Through forgiveness and faith, Joseph had become a bridge between his family's past and their future in God's plan. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land. He will take you to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, fulfilling the covenant he made." And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, "God will surely come to your aid. When that happens, you must carry my bones up from this place and bury them in the promised land." So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after he was embalmed, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. His body would wait there for centuries until the Israelites left Egypt and carried his bones to Canaan. Even in death, Joseph's faith looked forward to God's promises being fulfilled for future generations of his family. The man who had interpreted dreams and saved nations had become part of God's eternal plan for his people. Joseph's story reminds us that God can use our worst experiences to accomplish his best purposes in our lives. His journey from betrayal to redemption shows us the power of forgiveness and the faithfulness of God through every season. And so we come to the end of Joseph's remarkable journey from a dreamer in a colourful coat to a wise ruler who saved nations. His story reminds us that even when life seems unfair, even when those closest to us betray us, God is still working. The pit that his brothers threw him into became a stepping stone to the palace where he would serve Egypt and save lives. The prison that held him unjustly became the place where he would meet those who would introduce him to Pharaoh. Every betrayal, every hardship, every moment of despair was being woven into a tapestry of redemption and purpose. Joseph's life shows us that forgiveness is not just possible, but necessary for our own healing and growth. He chose to see God's hand in his suffering, rather than becoming bitter about the injustice he had experienced. His story encourages us to trust in God's timing, even when his plan seems delayed or unclear to us. The dreams of his youth were not forgotten by God, but fulfilled in ways that brought blessing to many. Tonight, as you rest, remember that your own story is still being written by the same faithful God who guided Joseph. Sweet dreams, and may you find peace in knowing that God can use every chapter of your life for his good purposes. The God who turned Joseph's pit into a palace is the same God who loves you and has plans for your life. Rest well, knowing that your story, like Joseph's, is held in the hands of a loving and faithful God.